Hello and welcome to Admissions Live. This is your weekly web show for college admissions professionals. We are part of the HigherEdLive network, where we believe in the importance of digital development and professional empowerment. College costs are at the forefront of the college search, so it's important for those of us who work with students and families in a college counseling capacity to understand the basics of financial aid. I'm excited to go over some of these basics tonight in my Financial Aid 101 presentation. We're going to present some of the myths that I've encountered when meeting with students and families. Most often in the conversation, I hear these same phrases over and over again. So we're going to cover myths, we're going to cover some basics and some really strong counseling tips. But before I do that, I want to give a huge thank you to the sponsors that make Admissions Live possible. Admissions Live is sponsored by Scavenger, a Google-funded mobile game about going places, doing challenges, and earning points. For the last 2 years, schools have been using Scavenger U for orientation and admissions events. Have you tried it yet? Admissions Live is sponsored by Welcome to College, who believe it's all in the visit and have created web and mobile applications to help institutions measure and manage their most critical recruitment tool, the college visit. Visit welcometocollege.com to learn more or tweet at Welcome to College about a demo. Admissions Live is sponsored by Zinch.com, the preferred destination by over 3 million students to research schools and scholarships, and to showcase themselves as more than a test score. Over 1,000 colleges and universities around the world partner with Zinch to attract and enroll best fit students on the largest college search social network in the world. To learn more about Zinch, email outreach@zinch.com or tweet at socialadmission. And last, Admissions Live is sponsored by Integral, the creators of the Schools app on Facebook. Check out their webinar series about how private social networks can increase yield and retention. That happens every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and we've just sent out a tweet with that link and tweets with other links to our sponsored events. So be sure to head over to Twitter and follow along with the Admissions Live hashtag and follow the @HigherEdLive Twitter handle for all of our important updates from HigherEdLive.com. So I want to thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Ashley Hennigan, bringing you a special episode of Admissions Live, where I'm going to cover financial aid basics, myths, and counseling tips. I want to give a special thank you to my financial aid colleagues and friends who helped me put this show together tonight. As always, if you're tuning in to the live broadcast on HigherEdLive.com, you're welcome to chat with us using Twitter and the Admissions Live hashtag, which is Admissions Live. All right, let's get started. Before we can talk about financial aid, I want to cover some definitions of financial aid. Financial aid can be used based on merit and can be in the form of gifts or self-help. So let's get started with gift money, because that's the best kind in my eyes. Gift money for students can be in the form of scholarships or grants. So scholarships we're going to define as money that doesn't have to be paid back. It's awarded on the basis of merit or skill. And for this merit aid, a FAFSA form or a financial aid form is not required. Usually other kinds of credentials are required to receive scholarship. Like a high school transcript, or students can receive athletic scholarships or achievement scholarships for other things that they've done. A grant is another form of gift money. This is money that also does not have to be paid back. That's why we like the gift money. And this is awarded based on financial need. So a grant is going to be awarded based on a student's financial need. A scholarship is going to be awarded based on merit. Both are kinds of gift money. The other kinds of financial aid that families typically would define financial aid as is this self-help money that is based on need, often in the form of a loan. So loans are monies that are available to students and parents to borrow, and that can help pay for educational expenses, but of course these loans need to be paid back. The other form of self-help financial aid that you usually don't think about is employment. So employment can allow a student to earn money to help pay back their educational costs. And that is something that some financial aid offices will include as a part of their financial aid packages. So those are kind of the basic forms of financial aid. We have scholarship, we have grants, we have loans, and we have employment. So let's talk about where these financial aid pieces come from. They can come from the federal government. For example, the Pell Grant is a grant that's offered by the federal government. There are other kinds of grants out there, like the SEOG. Federal government can also supply loans and work study. So they are a part of a lot of those different kinds of financial aid that we just went over. Financial aid can also come from your state or the student's state that they're in. Oftentimes the state funding is for a student who's going to attend a college or university in the state that they're residing. However, state funding sometimes can be transferred from state to state, and usually it's on a case where a student is maybe going into a field or into a major that is not offered by a college or university within their state. So the student has to travel out of state to earn that degree. In some states, students are able to take their state funding with them and apply that to their financial aid package in the other state, which is great. Financial aid can come from colleges and universities. In a lot of cases, the largest chunk of aid is coming from a student's own college or university. Many colleges will offer those merit scholarships. They'll offer need-based grants. Less so are they offering their own kinds of loans, but we also will see some larger campuses that are employing students on a kind of work-study basis, different than that federal work-study program, or maybe in addition to a federal work-study program. Financial aid can also come from private sources. So you might see businesses or foundations, charitable organizations offering scholarships, or grants to students. And so these, a lot of times we're seeing students going outside of their normal college financial aid process and doing their own scholarship searches in order to find some of these private sources. You also see in a lot of high schools, certain organizations, private families or local businesses that will award scholarships to students from a specific high school that are doing a specific thing or have been awarded a certain merit scholarship based on something at that high school. So see a lot of students bringing in those private sources, but there are a lot more private sources out there than I think most families are aware of, or they start thinking about going after private sources too late. So when we talk about counseling students, we definitely want them to start looking for those private sources a lot earlier in the search than many of the students will. A few other forms of financial aid and sources, you might see the Veterans Administration offering financial aid to veterans or to their dependents. And then we also see employers that can offer financial aid, less so at the undergraduate level. We see that more so at the graduate level for folks that are already employed. Employers might offer a financial benefit or a financial aid benefit for continuing education. So we see that a lot more than we would at the undergraduate level. All right, so those are the main sources of financial aid. And now that we have the basic definitions down and those sources outlined, I want to talk about the 6 myths about financial aid that I most often encounter when I'm counseling students and families. So the 6 myths, I will give them to you now, and then we'll kind of break them down and talk about why they're myths and not facts. So the first myth I hear: I make too much money to qualify for aid. Hear that a lot from families. Number 2, filling out the forms is a waste of time. Number 3, I saved too much money to qualify for financial aid. That one is another one that I hear a lot. Myth number 4, my home equity will prevent me from receiving financial aid. You hear that one a lot. The number 5, my aid award is accurate And similarly, myth number 6, my aid award is final. So we're going to break down those 6 myths for you now. And the first one, I make too much money to qualify for financial aid. Income is just one of several factors that is used to calculate need-based financial aid. So now we've already talked about scholarships being a form of financial aid. Of course, for those scholarships that are based on merit, they're not looking at the need of a student. They're looking at the merit that that student has. So for many colleges and universities that are offering merit-based scholarships, that's something that's separate from the need-based aid that a lot of colleges are also offering to students. So when we're talking about families that say I make too much money to qualify for aid, they're probably talking about the need-based financial aid. But income, again, is only one of several factors that's calculated into that need-based aid formula. The FAFSA is what I'm going to be referencing for most of this presentation as the kind of universal form for financial aid that colleges and universities are using to judge whether a student is going to qualify for need-based aid or not. And with the FAFSA form, they're not just looking at income, they're also looking at household size, they're looking at the number of children that are in college, they're looking at assets, and they're looking at income tax. There's additional financial information that will reduce income. So they're looking at education credits. If a family member is continuing their own education at the same time, they will look at education credits to decrease the income number. They'll also look at things like child support that's been paid out. So income is not a flat number. There's also special circumstances that can be reviewed by the financial aid administrator. For example, a one-time increase in income, say a family member had a bonus or they were converting to a Roth IRA and that made their income look a lot larger for this year than it would be for other years. That's a special circumstance that can be reviewed. Other special circumstances are if the family that you're counseling is paying for private school tuition. That's something that can be adjusted for. A really popular one that families are not aware of is that if they have unusually high medical bills or dental expenses that they're paying for, those are things that all can be reviewed as part of the overall picture for financial needs. So it's not just income. When you're talking with a family that says something to the effect that they make too much money to qualify for aid, but they're still feeling discouraged that they will need financial aid, there's probably more to that picture. And so they probably already know that their income might look higher than what they can actually afford for the student's education. So it's always worth investigating a little bit more as to why they're concerned, if they are meeting a certain income threshold, why they won't be able to afford the student's overall picture at your college or university. So that's myth number 1. Myth number 2, it's usually the same family, saying that filling out the forms is a waste of their time. So they don't believe they're going to qualify for financial aid and they don't want to fill out the financial aid forms. You should always counsel the family and student to fill out the forms regardless of whether they believe they qualify for financial aid or not. Because frankly, they don't know whether they qualify for financial aid until they apply. They're never going to know. They may have a pretty good idea, or maybe they've had other children attend college and they've gone through this process before and they didn't receive financial aid the first time. Well, they're not going to know whether they qualify or not until they apply. It's a free application. The federal government's form is a free application for financial aid, so it's of no cost to them. It's a little bit of a time cost to them, but they should never have to pay to fill out that financial aid form, and they should never have to pay for financial aid advice. Each student will have a financial aid counselor assigned to them when they're accepted at their college or university, and oftentimes those financial aid counselors are available to students before they've been admitted and are offering free financial aid advice. So please send your students over to the financial aid office to have some of that additional counseling if what you can provide them as an admissions counselor or as a school counselor isn't enough information. If they have really specific questions about how something will work at their college that they're interested in, they absolutely should reach out to the financial aid and scholarship office and receive that free financial advice, that financial planning advice. My university, the only form that we require is the federal government's FAFSA form to be reviewed for need-based aid at our institute, for federal aid, for any New York State aid, but other private institutions, students may need to complete other financial aid forms. So there might be other forms out there that do have fees associated with them, and that's something that the student will have to review, but the federal form is a free form. Federal student loans, including the federal parent loan for undergraduate students and the PLUS loan, require the FAFSA. So if you are meeting with a family who doesn't think that they're going to qualify for need-based financial aid, but they're interested in these federal loan programs, they're going to have to fill out the FAFSA to be considered for any of those federal loans. And those are the ones, of course, that we want to encourage students to go after if they qualify, because those are the ones that are going to be at a lower interest rate than the private loans that are out there and that are available to them. The last reason that you want to encourage these families to fill out these forms and tell them that it's not a waste of their time is because financial circumstances can change. And if something were to happen to the family's financial situation during the year, the financial aid office often can help and can adjust a student's financial aid in the middle of the year, but they can only do that if they have a FAFSA on file. So if something were to happen and the student's FAFSA is on file, it's going to be much easier for them to make adjustments should the family's financial situation change. So it's absolutely not a waste of the family's time to fill out these forms. The FAFSA form is of no cost to them and can only benefit them if they do qualify for some of these programs. Number 3, the third financial aid myth is that they've saved too much money to qualify for aid. So oftentimes I hear from families that they're afraid they won't qualify for aid because they have been saving for their students' college. And a lot of times they're discouraged that they have been doing the saving with goodwill for their student, and that it's going to hurt them now that they've been putting all of this extra money aside for college. And that is simply not the case. We absolutely want to encourage families to save for their students' college education. There is a built-in asset protection allowance in the FAFSA, and this amount is based on the older parent, and it changes as the parent gets older, and it's to protect them for retirement. So retirement savings altogether are not included as assets. If a parent is saving for retirement, this is not something that the FAFSA is going to be going after and saying that funding should be coming out to go into the child's education. However, if a large contribution is made into the retirement account the prior year that the FAFSA is filed, that will be counted. So we don't want our families to be saving a bunch of money and moving it into retirement all in one chunk. They should be saving at a steady pace to not get hit with that financial aid savings. So the family savings account will be protected. Those assets will be protected depending on the older parent's age. And as an example, if we have a 2-parent household, the oldest parent is 51 years old, those assets are going to be protected up to $50,000 in their savings. So they really are protecting a large chunk of the family savings before they're going to ask that be allocated to the child's education. So really have to encourage families to save for their education and reassure them that when they are applying for financial aid, that their savings isn't going to hurt them. So when you hear someone say that they've saved too much to qualify for financial aid, they really have to be saving a huge chunk of change to have that impact their child's financial aid award. The fourth myth that I often hear is that that a family's home equity is going to prevent them from receiving financial aid. Now, this is something that you hear from families that are chatting with neighbors who maybe had a student go through the financial aid process 10 or 15 years ago when home equity was a part of the FAFSA calculation. It is no longer calculated at all. It is not reported whatsoever on the FAFSA, so it is not considered for federal aid. Now, some private colleges will collect home equity, and that is something that you'll see on the CSS profile form, and they'll use it for calculating the college-based financial aid, but it's never going to be something that is calculated for the federal aid. So that one is absolutely a myth. Home equity will not prevent a student from receiving aid. So that is good news. Myth number 5, my financial aid award is accurate. Many students believe that when they receive their financial aid package, that is it, that it's set in stone, that it's absolutely correct, and they don't question it. Well, mistakes do happen, and we need to encourage students and families to ask questions. So make sure when they are filling out the FAFSA that they have released their FAFSA information to all of the colleges that they're applying to. Families need to check that student aid report for accuracy. If they fill out the FAFSA form and get that student aid report back and it looks very different than their own calculations might be, they need to go ahead and check that they didn't add an additional 0 somewhere when they were filling out the form. So mistakes absolutely can happen during this process. Families must make all the necessary updates to their once their tax returns have been filed too. So if if the family is filling out the FAFSA form with estimates and there are big changes when the taxes are actually filed, they need to make sure that that FAFSA is updated too. So mistakes can absolutely happen on the family end of things when they're filling out these forms, but mistakes can happen on the college end of things too. So it's okay to question these financial aid awards when they're coming out. Families should feel free to communicate with financial aid offices if they have any extenuating circumstances or if they have information to share that's not adequately captured on the FAFSA. So families might be going through the FAFSA form and see that there is a big part of their family income that's being allocated to maybe an elderly family member that they're taking care of, or they had to replace the roof last year. These kinds of things happens all the time, and they're not necessarily things that are going to be asked about on the FAFSA form. So if there's any extenuating circumstances or anything that is clearly not being divulged onto a FAFSA form, they need to feel free to communicate that with their financial aid office. And they can do that and be proactive about it and let financial aid know before the financial aid package is put together. Or oftentimes colleges and universities will allow for an appeals process where a student can receive their financial aid package, review it, and then appeal to the college providing more information than what was provided in the first case. If I was a financial aid counselor, I think I would appreciate having all of that information up front. So when you're advising students, if you know you have a student that is worried about financial aid, make sure that they're thinking about all of those things while they're going through the FAFSA form and that they're putting together a letter for the financial aid office so when they're reviewing the student for aid, they have a really clear picture as to what the student need is. So the financial aid award is not always accurate. Mistakes can happen when families are filling out the FAFSA form, and mistakes can happen on the college side too. So it's absolutely okay to ask questions. And then the last myth about financial aid is that the aid award is final. The aid awards are not final. For most 99% of colleges and universities out there, when a financial aid award is published, it is not a final award. Circumstances can change throughout the year and from one year to the next. So just as college tuition can change, family income can change. Also, if there is any estimated income that's reported and the income is actually less than what the family estimated, that can be adjusted for. If a family's financial situation changes after the financial aid award was calculated, say there was a loss of a job or an unanticipated medical expense, those situations can be adjusted for. So you want to make sure that families are keeping the lines of communication open with their financial aid counselor. They are there to help the students, and they really are going to be looking for the complete picture. So providing the most information that the family has available. They don't need to just rely on that FAFSA form to be the end all to their financial aid award. So the aid award is not final. As I mentioned, many colleges do offer an appeals process where a family can provide more information. Some colleges are more flexible with others when the student is shopping colleges at the very end, and so students can often submit financial aid awards that they've received from other colleges to see if colleges can make it an affordable choice for the student to make the decision to attend their college. Although I think you'll find that very few colleges are going to match scholarships or match certain grants from other schools. And that's because costs vary so much from one school to another. You might have received a very large scholarship from University A, but University A might have a much larger tuition than University B. And so the scholarship is not going to translate the same, and I don't think that you're going to find many colleges or universities that are going to match awards for a student or get into a bidding war over a student. You won't really see that, but you will see that financial aid offices are flexible and allow students to provide them with more financial information, get a clearer picture as to what the family's financial situation is, and can help make adjustments to make that hopefully an affordable choice for the student when they're making their final enrollment decision. Before we wrap up the show tonight, I want to cover a few counseling tips that I think will help families through the financial aid process. I want also, for those of you that are tuning in, if you want to use the Admissions Live hashtag and have any comments for tonight, ask any questions. Again, I am not a financial aid professional. I am simply providing some of the helpful tips and tricks that I think are helpful for myself when I'm counseling families. But now is a great time to send any of your thoughts over via Twitter. So some of the counseling tips that I want to emphasize are that families are reviewing that student aid report for accuracy. A lot of times that student aid report is the first thing that families see. They see it much sooner than they would any kind of financial aid award. So making sure that that student aid report is absolutely accurate is going to ensure that the student's financial aid package is the most accurate that they can get. Students also want to watch for financial aid letters from each college, and they want to follow up with colleges if they're not receiving them. So if you're a school counselor and you're working with students who have applied to several colleges, students should be keeping track of when they're receiving their acceptance letters and when they're receiving financial aid letters. It would be great for students to have a checklist of the things that they should be receiving from colleges. Have they received their decision letter yet? If the colleges are providing decision deadlines at all, the student should be keeping track of that. So have they received their decision by the deadline? Have they received any notification of merit-based scholarships? Have they received their complete financial aid package from each of the colleges before they start making their final college decisions? A lot of times follow-up is needed with the colleges. Students may have forgot to send a FAFSA to the college that they want a financial aid package from. So students should feel comfortable following up with the colleges at any time, asking them if the FAFSA is there on file, how long it's going to take for their financial aid package to be put together and sent out to them. Students should be able to ask whether the financial aid package is going to be sent over the mail, if it's something that they can view online through their student portal. All of these things are going to vary from college to college, and there is a lot of talk going on right now about making this a more uniform system, making financial aid letters more uniform so that students don't have the confusion of different expectations from different colleges or different looking letters with different kinds of language from college to college. So collectively, colleges and universities across the United States are working together to make this more of a uniform process for students as they're receiving their aid awards. It's not the simplest thing, though, because you can imagine how different these processes are from one college to another, and making it into one kind of a boilerplate form isn't very easy. So they're still working on that. I don't think that's anything that we're going to see universally this year, but coming up next year, I wouldn't be surprised if we have something clearer for our students in place. Students need to read all the supplemental materials that are provided to them as well. So a lot of times students will receive a financial aid letter, and they'll receive information about how to read that letter, how to understand what their financial aid award means. And they should absolutely contact their financial aid counselor with any questions at any time. These are folks that are offering them free advice. They're the ones that understand their letters best. So encourage the student to pick up the phone if they're in your counseling office and speak with their financial aid counselor directly. Students need to also understand the total cost of attendance. A lot of times, students, up until that point that they have a financial aid award in their hands, are looking at tuition, room, and board. They're looking at those billable expenses that they're going to be receiving every year in a bill, but they're not including the other expenses that come along with attending a college or university. So cost of attendance is going to include things like books, transportation. It's going to include other personal expenses. These roughly, for my university, are about an additional $2,000 a year. So it's not chump change. This is a significant amount of money. It can include student health insurance, other kinds of fees that students aren't expecting. This is something that they need to ask about and understand much sooner than the day that bill is generated and they see it in their hand, or the day that they realize that they didn't allocate for the flight to get themselves to move-in day for orientation. So having a student understand the total cost of attendance is so important, beyond just those billable expenses that they see published in the college handouts and on the websites. Students should be making notes of the billing dates. They should know when the bills are going to be generated and when they're due. Oftentimes this is over the summer when students are no longer in high school and can be meeting with their school counselor. They're not yet a college student on your campus, so they don't have someone to go to during that summertime that's at their fingertips during the day. So students should be making notes of when the first bill is going to be generated, absolutely, and when their first bill is going to be due. And this way they can plan for getting all of those monies together so that they're able to pay for that first bill, making sure that they have all their student loans and grants and things in place before that first bill is generated so that they're able to pay that first bill on time and get started out on the right foot. Last, students should be considering other financial alternatives. And this is something that a lot of students don't think about until they have their financial aid award in their hand and they realize that they're going to need additional funding to make college an affordable choice for them. Financing alternatives can come in a lot of different forms, and outside scholarship searches are things that students should be starting really early. Students can go to a lot of different helpful websites to find out what kind of outside scholarships they might qualify for, what kind of private organizations are available offering money, and they should be looking at sites like Zinch.com. They should be looking at sites like FastWeb to be doing some more extensive outside scholarship searches. They can also consult with the colleges and universities that they're applying to about deferred payment plans. There might be students who want, instead of paying the full tuition for the year up front or the full semester up front, they want to pay in installments. And a lot of colleges will offer a deferred payment plan where students can pay in 2 or 3 installments with a small fee associated to that. So that's something that students are going to want to consider much earlier than when that first bill is generated. Students should also consider the federal loan programs. Again, these would need a FAFSA on file, but the Federal Plus loan is a parent loan for undergraduate students. It is a very popular offering from the federal government. Again, it has those lower federal interest rates, and that's something that students would need to apply to in the spring of their senior year. And then lastly, they want to consider some of the other education aid opportunities that they might have. If they're going to a college or university that's going to require them to be involved in a paid internship experience or cooperative education, that's something that a student can factor into their own kind of financial aid. So they might find that in their 3rd year, their college is going to require them to get job experience and work in a paid job opportunity. And a lot of students will be able to use this money to help finance their education. And it should be something that students do plan for. My university is a co-op university, and I see a lot of students that are able to use their co-op earnings to help them finance their last few years of college. But I always warn students, and I warn their parents more often, that I see students coming back with new cars and new wardrobes too. So if it's not a part of the family's financial plan, they might see that the students' cooperative education earnings or internship earnings are going elsewhere. But it's great to have a plan for all 4 years, for students to really have a complete picture of what it is that that they're getting themselves into. Cost is absolutely at the forefront of our students' minds in their search. It's not just at the end when they're making their college decisions. Cost is a huge factor in students picking colleges to apply to and even colleges to visit. So we need to make sure that we are well prepared to help advise our students, and that we're well prepared to help our students understand this complicated admissions and financial aid process. So that is the rundown. That is the introduction to financial aid. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you found it helpful. And we are going to be back on Admissions Live next week at the same time, 7 p.m. Eastern. Same place, HigherEdLive.com. You can catch the live part of our show on HigherEdLive.com/live. And you can, of course, catch all of the archived episodes of our show on the Admissions Live tab on HigherEdLive.com. So I hope you'll join us for a live show next week and the weeks after that, and I will see you then. Thanks a lot.